question is, are you ready?
What do you guys want to talk about?
Let me talk to you.
Throwdown Nation, we are live. It is episode 79 of the Throwdown with Matt. It is a Monday night. We are live on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter/X, Facebook, and Twitch. And tonight we are throwing down with Pittsburgh-based wrestler Unbreakable Shawn Phoenix. How you doing tonight, Shawn?
I'm better than I deserve. How are you?
Likewise.
Good,
you know,
good.
I think we're all probably, for the most part, better than we deserve.
That's what I like about that. If you don't feel entitled to anything, anything you have is a blessing.
Absolutely. And one thing I'll go ahead and let everybody know, if you're watching this live and you have questions or comments, throw them in the chat. And any questions or comments will be read and answered either as we go, or we'll do a little viewer Q&A at the end. So we'll go ahead and get started with the first and most obvious question, Shawn, and that is, how long have you been wrestling?
Well, I actually just passed my professional wrestleversary this past January 30th. My first professional match was in 2016, so I'm not good at math. Less than 20 years, we'll say that. But I've been involved with wrestling, with backyard wrestling, since I was 14. And that wasn't necessarily like jumping off roofs and hitting each other with light tubes. We would actually travel across state lines after meeting on message boards and trying to put on the most professionally flavored matches as possible. Everybody had their different strengths. You did have your deathmatch guys. You did have your comedy guys. I was always the character guy that would always end up, taking some dumb bumps. But I did have some training back then as well, and a lot of people were trained. So I don't really like to necessarily say I've been wrestling since 2007, because that's like I did it as a hobby back then. But I've been abusing my body for a lot longer than my pro career says.
Gotcha. So who actually, when it came time to, I guess, move beyond the backyard stuff, who actually trained you?
So initially, I started my training back in 2007 when I was 16 with Shirley Doe in the Pittsburgh area. Shirley responsible for training Joaquin Wild, Elias, a couple people, but I couldn't afford it as an unemployed 16-year-old. I didn't quite know how I was going to make that work. So then I went back to backyarding after a little bit just to have a hobby, and then finally put an end to that and actually got trained with the Stronghold Wrestling Academy under Brandon Kay and Crusher Henson. I always wanted to get trained locally. I know a lot of people travel to get, trained by names, but I figured I can pick that up along the way. And Brennan Kay and Crusher Henson, super thankful for them. They're responsible for training Lee Moriarty, Lady Frost, Thea Hale. So a lot of names, have come out under these local vets.
Gotcha. Um, so in terms of the early portions of your training, what would you say was the most challenging aspect of it to wrap your mind and your body around?
Fantastic question. How do I answer this without coming off cocky? I back then, backyard wrestling kind of still had a stigma. It wasn't up until like 2018, 19 that it really started to die down, thanks to GCW's show that they would put on the 4th of July. And the stigma also died, with like a lot of people on TV admitted to it as well. So the stigma kind of died, but I didn't want to go in there with bad, give them a bad impression. Oh, this guy's from the backyard or whatever. But it also did help that I did have some training at that point under Shirley Doe. So it was kind of like there was a challenge of, I don't want to come off like I know more than I actually do, because the whole point to me getting professionally trained is to have a reputable trainer give their stamp of approval of me, because anybody could just backdoor their way into the pro bookings, which I did have opportunities to do that, but I respected the business too much. So it was kind of a balance of like, I don't really want to show my hand, but, like I also do, because I don't want to spend too much time, so that was kind of challenging. But like I said, because of the fact that I did have some training, that kind of was a pretty good alibi in case, I did anything exceptionally, like, oh yeah, we went over that in 2007. I think the most challenging actual thing that I learned was probably a simple leg drop. Like, I've never done those before. And coming down was kind of like sending jolts up my spine. And I was getting like frustrated because like I do way cooler things. Like I know how to do backflips and stuff like that. Like, I'm never going to do this. But like, I wanted to do it. I want to give up. And like, that was probably the most challenging thing. It probably took me around like 5 times to get it. Like, it wasn't anything I got stuck on. In addition to that, working 2 retail jobs at the time, trying to find balance in my day-to-day life, working one job 9 to 4, and then driving to my other job 4:30 to 9, my break in the day only being that commute, not getting a lunch, and then Wednesday being my one day off for practice. That was pretty challenging, but I'm glad that I did it.
No doubt, no doubt. And we'll go ahead and move early on to the new thing in your life. You are the recent recipient of a cochlear implant.
Correct.
You lost hearing in your left ear, correct?
Correct.
After fracturing your skull wrestling 6 years ago.
Correct.
I've got a video of that incident that I'll share my screen and show in a few minutes. But before I show the video, sort of give us kind of the backstory on what happened in the match and what basically led up to the incident.
Of course. Without pulling the curtain back too much, there was a story going on in this company where we had a tag team of two good guys, and one good guy went missing, whatever reason, and the one remaining was trying to find it, literally putting up, missing pictures until that good guy came back. But then he turned on his friend and brought in 3, big heavies. And then that guy that was betrayed would find a new person to try to fight the evil group. And every time those bad guys would take out that replacement partner. And I had history with those bad guys in multiple companies in the area, West Virginia, Pittsburgh, Cleveland. And it made sense to bring me in at that point. And so I came in as a surprise. And it was really cool because that company I actually grew up at Front Row. It was my first indie company I ever went to. So it was like really like a full circle moment. Coincidentally, I couldn't make a couple of those shows. I had bookings in other states, and I committed to those, so I wasn't going to cancel those. But it worked out for the story. The replacement guys are getting beat up and taken out and injured. It worked out. So I was actually that particular match actually went to a no contest, and we kept fighting afterwards. Like, it was like a blood feud type thing. And I attempted to do my 450, my finishing move, off the top turnbuckle, rather, not even the rope, the turnbuckle, through a table on the outside, and I was supposed to break my ribs and be out until the big Avengers come together climax. It just so happens I actually happened to get seriously injured. I actually, believe it or not, was supposed to crash to the table and then get escorted away, and then zip down to another company about an hour away and be involved in a what's the type of match called where there's people, a lumberjack match. I was supposed to be a lumberjack.
Oh yeah.
I was supposed to do that, but needless to say, that didn't happen.
Wow. Well, I'm going to share my screen and basically show the incident.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Yeah, prior to what I'm doing now, I actually used to be a paramedic, and
Oh, wow.
and seeing your facial expression when you hit, I was like, yeah, that's no bueno. I mean,
Right. Sorry to cut you off. My parents are retired paramedics for the city of Pittsburgh. So
oh, nice.
Much respect for you guys. Sorry to cut you off.
Oh, no. But yeah, I mean, I saw the look, and I was like, yeah,
out like a light.
Out like a light. Yeah. Do you remember it at all?
So funny you should ask. Ironically, I also meant to mention that happened in Pittsburgh, in my area, and my dad was at my merch table. One of the rare times he came, and one of the rare times my mom and sister came, and they were sitting in the audience with my aunt and uncle. So it was like a big family reunion. Yeah. And so I remember when I crashed through and I came to. Eventually I got to the point where, there was a little bit of confusion. I didn't know what happened. And I kept asking, what happened? What happened? And I kept getting different answers. You fell, you hit your head, you hit the guardrail. And that was only confusing me more. But in the moment, nobody really could retrace that trauma. So eventually, once I was like, okay, I'm injured, I realized I hit my head because, it was the worst pain in my life. I also had a couple of concussions previously at that point, and I actually take concussion very, very, very seriously from just backyard wrestling, even though I wasn't getting hit on the head. From what I gather, I took a nice shot to the head and didn't know I had what could have been considered a concussion, and then continued to wrestle. So I ended up doing physical therapy and stuff like that to actually be able to wrestle again. So I remember being on the floor and thinking, son of a gun, I just undid all that work that I did, 8 years ago, and I'm going to have to do this all over again. And then I realized, okay, well, the way that I got hurt, no doubt about it, concussion, way worse than how I got the concussion previously in 2010. Excuse me. So I kind of went into panic mode, not in the sense of like freaking out, but I was like, okay, what do I remember? Today is October 6, 2018. We're at Elizabeth. We're in Elizabeth. IWC's Unbreakable. It's me, Dan Hooven versus Atticus Cogar and Remy LeVay. And then how do we start the match? And I went through the entire thing until I got to that 450. And that's when I realized that's probably when I got hurt. But it was kind of reassuring to immediately start, recalibrating and turning the gears and seeing what could I recall. And that kind of eased my nerves. And like, okay, this probably isn't that bad. And in a strange twist of fate, my concussion was not that bad. Granted, it is never good to get a concussion. And once you get one, A lot easier to get another.
Yep.
But it turns out that the best thing that could have happened was my skull fracturing, because had it not fractured, my brain would have slammed onto that skull full force. But since it broke, it kind of, the momentum kind of passed through it. Almost like when somebody gets slammed on a table and it doesn't break, that looks way more painful because there's all that shock and momentum that isn't dissipating. And in addition to that, I did have a subdural hematoma. It was a really small one. Granted, it's never good to have a small bleed in your brain, but had my brain swelled up, they would have needed to go in and take out a piece of my skull anyway. So in another weird twist of fate, there was a crack there that could kind of alleviate any of the pressure that was there. Now, thankfully, I didn't need brain surgery. There was a risk. I did end up, I was like bleeding from my ear and was leaking spinal fluid, and they had to put a catheter in my lower back, and I had to sleep at like a 45-degree angle, which was very, very uncomfortable, and pull the spinal fluid down to the bottom of my lumbar spine to kind of, so it wouldn't breach the skull. And that had to stay in my spine for like 3 days. And then when they removed it, if it started leaking spinal fluid again, I would have needed immediate brain surgery right then and there, because essentially I had an open canal straight to my brain, huge risk of meningitis. So thankfully I didn't need that.
Gotcha.
Fun fact. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, please.
That moment, actually, I've been able to watch it back and see what I did wrong, and I don't really want to pull the curtain back too much. But in that before that moment, the villain Atticus Cogar smacked my head on the table, and I looked to my right, and I had realized earlier in the day Rosa Mendez had arrived, and son of a gun, there she is, front row. And we make eye contact, and we had met like in passing before. And when she arrived to the show, like I showed her how to get backstage, like just barely knew each other. And, I reached out to her, like, kind of like, help me, Keith Morton style. And she started to like really get behind me and rally behind me. And I was like, we got her, like this woman has an action figure of herself and has traveled the continental US. And she's invested. And then I remember thinking, like, I'm going to do this sweet flip in front of freaking Rosa Mendez, and then crash and burn. And then at one point when I came to, I ended up vomiting just straight blood. And my initial thought was I had internal bleeding, but that was from just pulling down my throat. And I remember throwing up just straight blood. And my thought was, I just threw up in front of Rosa Mendez. This is so embarrassing. But we ended up becoming pretty good friends. I love that woman to death, and she's an angel. So
that's awesome. So, did you realize immediately that you had lost hearing, or how did that all progress?
That's a great question. It is kind of hard to answer now that it's been 6+ years. And obviously a traumatic brain injury, everything's a little bit spotty, so the whole sense of time is all a blur. Right. But I do remember kind of like taking things in moments, and I remember registering, this is the worst pain I've ever been in, and I need to remember this moment for when somebody asks me, what is the worst pain I've ever been in? It is this, and it'll always be this, because I know, like, you forget pain, like our bodies don't remember it, like we can't unless you have like ongoing, you know what I mean? Excuse me. So after I kind of like processed all of that, I remember my dad was there. Also, like I said, my parents, retired paramedics. And I remember telling my mom earlier in the day, to this day, I text her after every match, no injuries. I made it to the show. Okay, whatever. And I remember standing in our kitchen listening, like, hey, this is going to be pretty brutal. Like, I'm going to get roughed up a little bit. My character is going to get beat up, but I'm going to be okay. And she thought the entire thing was part of the show. Thank God, because had she thought it was authentic, she would have been a mess. You figure mom's worry as it is, retired and a retired paramedic, and she just watched her firstborn nearly die. Where my dad was at the merch table, and the villains actually went to the merch table and kind of like slammed their fists on my table and got in my dad's face and said, "He's really hurt." And my dad immediately jumped into, emergency mode and ran over, and he was, by my side. And meanwhile, I actually saw the hard footage and could see my mom leaving. Like, she was so uncomfortable. She's like, "This isn't right. They're really toying with their emotions." And she left. But I remember at one point, to answer your question, telling my dad, I'm like, "Dad, I can't hear at all through my ear and through my left ear." And I remember him saying something along the lines of like, "Don't worry about that. That'll come back. You probably just boxed it," or I forget the phrase. And all things considered, that was, genuinely the least of my concerns. It sucked,
Right.
and I was kind of scared, but like, I didn't know the severity. I just knew I was really, really hurt, and I thought I had internal bleeding. And then the paramedics came, and I was like, "Okay, this is, I'm injured, right?" And we get into the ambulance, and they put me in a neck brace. First of all, as they're rolling me out, it felt like an entirety. It felt like a half hour, but there's no way it was a half hour of dead air, right? The show came to a stop, obviously.
Right.
But they got me in the neck brace and they took me away. And I remember thinking, like, you seriously could have heard a pin drop. Occasionally there was chance, "We love Shawn" and stuff like that. And as I was, being wheeled away, I remember thinking, do I do the thumbs up like a football player? Like, is that what I'm supposed to do? And everything, like, nah, that's so lame. That's not something my character would do. So I held up like the rock on like hand sign, and I was like, yeah. that feels right. Which I love in hindsight. I was so conscious of my persona in a moment that was very, very real. So he took me to the ambulance. And at that point, my mom had got into the ambulance, and she asked me, she was like, "Is this real?" And I thought I said, "Yeah, this is real." Apparently, I said to her, "I have no idea what's going on." And then she, well, to her credit, Andy Kaufman is one of my heroes. So the first time when I first got attacked in pro wrestling, I wore a neck brace to my Clark Kent job, just helps out. Like, I love going above and beyond. But it wasn't until we started driving away and I heard the siren, because I knew that was an emergency. Like, I know if an ambulance drives away from, like with a siren on, that's a life or death situation. And then we stopped very, very soon. And I was like, I know the area. There's no hospital that close. And they pulled me out and they loaded me into a helicopter. And I was like, "Oh, this is serious. Yeah. And they loaded me into a helicopter. Life flighting me. Yeah. And I remember, like, I kept going in and out of consciousness. I remember being like really tired, and they kept saying, "Stay with me." And at one point, I felt like I was unsupervised in the helicopter, and I was like, "Thank God I can rest my eyes." And they woke me back up, and I remember like taking off, thinking like, "This sucks. This is the first time in a helicopter, and I can't even look out of the goddamn window." So I was cursing, but like, I was lucid enough, but also didn't really know what happened, which I think is pretty funny, and still to this day remains my only helicopter ride, and I couldn't look out the window.
Right, yeah. I got to fly a couple of times. I was pretty much strictly a ground medic, but there were a couple of times where we ended up having to fly somebody, and they basically just grabbed me and said, "You're coming. We need an extra pair of hands."
Wow.
But I was so busy working on
you were saving a life.
I didn't have the time.
Right.
And I mean, it was such a quick flight anyway.
Right. That's another thing too. It felt like we got to the hospital in a blink of an eye, and like, I don't know if that was because I was going in and out of consciousness or because we were flying. But I also wanted to point out that with my aunt and uncle being there, they told my mom, "Go to the hospital." And as my mom was headed to the hospital, she was getting a hold of my brother. I don't know where my one brother was, but my one brother was working at a haunted house, and she was trying to get a hold of them. I don't really know what all she said, but like, she was gathering them, zipping to the hospital to and grabbing them along the way, where my aunt and uncle followed the ambulance and were giving my parents updates Like they followed it to the helicopter site, and which I think is really cool. At one point I actually had footage of the helicopter taking off, which I lost my hard drive, but that's neither here or there. But
very cool. So anyway, I guess moving forward 6 years, you find out you're a candidate for the cochlear implant.
correct.
Yeah. So I guess give us a quick rundown of the process for becoming a candidate for that and all of that.
Well, initially when I was in the hospital doing hearing tests, they told me I fractured my cochlea and there was an air bubble, and it was probably not salvageable. And then like a month later, going back for another follow up, it told me that I could get one, but they didn't advise it because I intended on wrestling again. And I was like, all right, cool. That's not going to worry about that. And I ended up getting cross aids, which are a pair of hearing aids that the dead ear is a microphone and sends it to the good ear, which I was excited to get that, but in all honesty, it wasn't good. Like it would have been beneficial if I was in the front seat of a car, but like in a locker room at a restaurant, it was just constant, all noise into one ear. Imagine like a funnel, like all noise. It was just too overwhelming. So I kind of just got used to not having those, and it wasn't until this past August where I worked with somebody who is also hearing impaired, and he has cochlear implants, at least one. And I was always under the impression that the gimmick is like attached to the scalp. And so when I saw him just take it off, I was like, wait a second, how'd you do that? And he explained that it was just a magnet. And I was like, get out of here. That is mind blowing, because I thought you couldn't do that. And I understood that, like, there is an implanted device, and I was like, well, like how frequently do I come down on the side of my head? So the risk of breaking it is, slim to none. So then I was like, I'm going to look into this. So then I scheduled an appointment, a hearing appointment, and they were like, okay, well, I got like a run of the mill like hearing test, and then they're like, oh, you need this type of hearing test, and I was able to get that a month later, which was crazy because I had to schedule the appointment, like the test and the follow up, like the results. And the receptionist was like, do you want them on the same day? Most people do. I was like, yeah, that makes sense, 2-hour window. And they were like, well, we can't see you until July of 2025. And I was like, oh, that sucks. And I was like, so can we do like one, different days? And they looked into it and they were like, yeah, we can do it November 3rd and November 4th. I was like, that's practically the same day at that point. So I went there and then did the test. And then my doctor confirmed, there's like, okay, you are a candidate. Like, the type of hearing loss, the testing they did, they were able to determine that a cochlear implant would help me. And then we scheduled surgery right then and there. We, lined up for surgery. And he also disclosed that initially, single-sided hearing loss is not covered by insurance. And that was, a big reason. Like I had to pay out of pocket for those crowds. We actually did a benefit show, and a lot of people donated their time to help me pay for that. And I can never repay them enough. It means the world to me that they did that. And I kind of feel bad that I didn't end up using the thing that they contributed to. But so I was like, this is kind of a bummer, and my mom was always like, yeah, I love music. I love going to live shows. I don't know if you can see all my CDs behind me. I got records to my right.
Yeah.
She was always like, why aren't you more upset about this? And I was like, it's such a small price to pay. It could have been so much worse. And she was like, yeah, but you lost your hearing. And I was like, yeah, I get it. And she was kind of like, I was kind of overwhelmed, like, this is probably going to be a lot of money. And like, yeah, I got a better Clark Kent job, and maybe I could take out a care credit card. And she kind of like alluded to the fact that she would help me along the way, which like, I would do that for my dog. If my dog needed glasses, I would totally do that. So I get her willing to do that for me, her son. But then we discovered that single-sided hearing loss is now covered by insurance, thanks to something
great.
to do with, I think, the previous presidential administration pushed something or a nudge. I don't really know. All I know is it's covered, and I was like, let's go, let's do this. So we were able to get the surgery. They wanted me to get the surgery like December 18th or something like that, but I had a booking December 21st. And I was like, let's do the 23rd so I can make this booking. And then I know that I'm going to have a half day at the Clark Kent on Christmas Eve. I'm going to have Christmas off. And then Thursday, Friday, then Saturday and Sunday, I can, it felt like that was the best time to do it. So I got it the day before Christmas Eve, and I couldn't be more happy.
That's awesome. And, the video that you did on your YouTube channel, basically going into a lot of detail about the process, was beautifully done, man.
Thank you.
And I encourage anybody that's watching this, go to Shawn's YouTube channel and check that out, because you really do a good job laying it all out there. And
that means the world to me, because I think I ended up with like a half hour's worth of footage, and I'm friends with some professional YouTubers, and I was like asking for advice, and I'm also terrible at video editing. My computer's from 2007. It probably can't even run any video editing software. So I was doing it on my phone, and it was like really frustrating. And then like I trimmed it down to like 18 minutes, and I'm like, oh, this still feels way too long. And then, with how short our attention spans are, I'm like, I don't know if people are going to watch this, much less is this going to be watchable with my very, very novice video editing. And I tried to make it a little entertaining here and there, but I appreciate that.
Gotcha. One thing I'll let you know, and I'll let everybody watching this know, something went technically wrong with Instagram. So we are actually not live on Instagram tonight, but we are live on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitch, and on Twitter. I don't know what has gone wrong with Instagram, but it wouldn't connect. So
that's a bummer.
But I will be posting clips onto Instagram tomorrow, and I'll post a link on there to the full video on YouTube. So, so I'm presuming that you've been a fan of wrestling probably the majority of your life. Is that pretty accurate?
At this point, yeah. Most people say, "Oh, were you a fan your whole life?" And my story is very unique. No, I actually wasn't allowed to watch wrestling for the earliest part of my life. I was born in '91, so I completely missed the Attitude Era. And like all my friends watched it. They would show up with like Kane shirts, and like I go to a sleepover and we'd play Warzone, and I would know who the Undertaker was, but I didn't, didn't really watch it. I wasn't allowed because, on one hand, my parents were a little bit overprotective because of the risk of like us hurting one another. I have two younger brothers, and in addition to that, the Attitude Era, 100% not appropriate for children. If I was 8 years old, my siblings would have been even younger. So I totally get it. And it wasn't until we were flipping through the channels one summer night, I think we had a cheater box. Hope the government doesn't come after us for that. We had like 2 free pay-per-view channels, and we're flipping through it, and we stumbled on the SummerSlam 2001, and it was Stone Cold versus Kurt Angle. And let me backtrack. There was one night we were outside, and we went inside and watched SummerSlam 1998, and I remember really liking The Undertaker. I was like, this guy's like Darth Vader and Batman, cool. And then he lost, and that kind of like ruined it for me. But then, SummerSlam 2001, Kurt Angle, Stone Cold, my brothers and I knew that Kurt Angle was a Pittsburgh guy. So we were like, come on, let us watch it. We know it's not real. Kurt Angle's from Pittsburgh. He doesn't swear or anything like that, which I didn't know. I was just, trying to sell, ice to somebody at a volcano. And eventually, like, my dad caved, and then it was The Rock versus Booker T. And I remember the finish to Kurt Angle versus Stone Cold, one of the best finishes I've ever seen, still to this day. We went home happy with The Rock versus Booker T. And from that moment on, I was hooked, and I felt like I had to catch up on all that knowledge that I missed, So from that point on, I've been, involved. I often hear a lot of people saying like, I used to watch wrestling, then I took a break from it and I started up again. I never took that break because around the time when most people get burnt out, that's when I'm getting more physically involved. And so like I don't even really necessarily watch it anymore. Well, now that it's on Netflix, it's a little bit easier now. But like for the longest time, like I would have it on in the background at my parents' place. Then when I moved out, like I don't have cable, so like I'd watch the pay-per-views, but it would kind of just be on. But like but yeah, like it's. I also enjoy being there too. Like I'd much rather be there than, even with hockey, a football game. Like I'd much rather. Well, with wrestling, I'd much rather do it. But if I'm not doing it, I'd much rather be there to feel it and everything like that. But yeah, so since I was around like 10 years old, I've been enamored with it.
Got you. So away from wrestling, what are some of your other hobbies and interests? I mean, I know you said music. I'm actually a music guy myself. I'm a hobbyist bass player, and
Oh, cool.
I love just about really just about any type of music. So
That's cool.
But,
I actually have no musical talent whatsoever. So I love going to concerts, seeing my favorite bands. I show up way too early and I get front row, and it's just me and the musician. And I almost enjoy it more than wrestling because it doesn't physically abuse my body and I'm not performing. It's like a moment where I can get that rush and not, have the eyes on me per se. So I enjoy it in that aspect. What other hobbies? I'm really into my animals, really passionate about my pets. They are literally my kids. I have a dog with special needs who's got a balance disorder, which I adopted because I myself have a little bit of balance issues. In addition to that, I collect CDs, records. Recently, I try to limit myself on what I collect. So, for example, I've been collecting like a line of like Star Wars merchandise from like one specific era because I'll get carried away. Sometimes I tend to make, customize my entrance vests, make custom action figures. And a crazy hobby of mine, I'm also into flesh suspending, which sounds exactly like what it is. If you don't know what that is, that's when my body, whether my back, my chest, gets physically pierced with, big needles and then connected with hooks. And then like I hang from the ceiling. Sometimes I'll do flesh pulls where it's a horizontal, like a tug of war. Which is really crazy to think about. A lot of people are like, what? That's crazy. But I actually, like, for the longest time, I was curious, like, what's the appeal to that? And somebody told me that, like, you get a natural high from that. And me being straight edge, I was like, that could be the only time I've ever, really felt a high. And then I befriended the team, and I was like, I want to do a photo shoot. Let's do this. I have the extra cash, and we did it. And then they asked me to join the team. So, like, tattoo conventions, art performances, whenever we're performing, I get tasked like, hey, do you want to do this? And it is really cool because I like to think I have a pretty high pain tolerance, and it is a way for me to perform, a way to get an adrenaline rush without really abusing my body. Like, it's weird to say, but like, I'm not doing a number on my joints. It's only flesh. And that's the name of my suspension team, because it's literally only flesh. It's just a superficial wound. And it's really cool, especially at tattoo conventions when there's a crowd of people watching me. It's an easy way to perform and get that rush. So there's that. I always hate that question, what are your hobbies? Because like, no matter how much I prepare, it's like, what all do I do? Like, I blank. And I'm sure there's other things that I'm totally forgetting. I'm really addicted to Pokemon Go. That actually really helped me during my recovery time. Going to a local park and doing that. And initially, when Pokemon Go launched in 2016, about a week after that, I got really, really sick. I also breathe fire in my entrance. And one particular time, I inhaled the fluid and got super, super sick. I got poisoned. Literally had. it's never good to have liquid in your lungs, much less poison.
No.
And I was bedridden for 2 weeks, and it was like the hottest thing in the world, Pokemon Go, that is. And my brother's like, "Hey, we're gonna go to South Park. You want to come?" And I'm like, "Guys, you know I can't breathe." So by the time I was able to play again, I once kind of like wrestling had to do like all that catching up, and I just kind of never stopped, and like that's been pretty fun doing that. So off the top of my head, that's kind of what it's like. Also in the video games as well.
Got you. So you're from Pittsburgh. What is your favorite thing about Pittsburgh?
I'll be right back. Do you want me to wait to answer?
No. I'm listening.
Okay.
I'm just walking across the room.
Okay. I really like that it is a major city, but it is almost like a hidden major city. Like it's not as big as New York City or Chicago, but it's not as small as, say, oh, hi, Poppers. It's not as small as Cleveland, Buffalo. Like it's in that Goldilocks zone of a metropolitan area. It's not like overwhelming. I live 15 minutes from downtown. My Clark Kent job is downtown Pittsburgh, so I get to see it every day. I like how influential it is. We have sport. The only major sports team we don't have is a basketball team. A lot of history with wrestling, a lot of history with films, and Mr. Rogers is a huge inspiration on me as a person. It's literally like a Goldilocks. In addition to that, there aren't really any, it's not really too dangerous, up until recently. There's been no tornadoes, but climate change, we now are in tornado alley, but like we're at no risk of a hurricane. There's no wildfires. There's no spiders that can kill us. So it's pretty safe here. At worst, we get flash floods, but I live on a hill. So it's, I love it. There's not really one thing I can say other than it is the Goldilocks zone. Gotcha.
But yeah, when you said you were an animal lover, I had to go and get my girl. She was just snoozing across the room, and I was like, this is Lady. So,
hi, Lady.
I think she wants to go back to the sofa.
Yeah, she said, "I want to go back to sleep, Dad." What the heck?
Yep. So, they say that the best wrestling personas are kind of yourself turned up to 11. So tell me a bit about in-ring Shawn Phoenix and kind of compare and contrast him with everyday you.
Fantastic question. I don't know. I mean, like, I could say it is me turned up to 11, but not in the way you think. Like, I view professional wrestling as a performance, and that was one of the ways I challenged myself a couple of years ago, was to stop thinking about pro wrestling as a sports-based, competition, however you want to phrase it, as a competition, like the logistics of it is a competition, but I wanted to stop thinking like that. At the end of the day, this isn't a contest, this is a show, and I don't wrestle, I perform. So my character, I've really, looked into who I am as a character and what my role is. And honestly, my role changes from show to show. I understand that This show, I might not be the big star. This show I might be. This show I might be, whatever. My role changes. That's my character that follows me through show to show, for that particular audience. But as far as myself turned up, I will say I do think that my never say die attitude is probably pretty close to home. I like to think that I'm pretty positive, and my persona genuinely loves what he does, which isn't unlike what me as a person. I'm not one of those people that's smiling all the time, just happy to be here. Like, my character can react appropriately if he's getting beat up all the time. Like, he will start to get pissed off. Like, I like to think it's pretty dimensional in that aspect. But I like to think, I wasn't kidding when I said Mr. Rogers is a huge inspiration on me. I try to live my life every day to make that man proud. So I also like especially, I was already like super positive before the skull fracture, but then that really like put everything into perspective. And waking up in the hospital and looking at my phone and seeing over like 500 notifications, like I just bawled my eyes every time. Like I would see it and just put it down, like I couldn't do it. But like that really helped me. And I was like, I have all the support. I can't let them down. I believe in me because they believe in me. And because they believe in me, I believe in them. And I try to inspire people. And I can't tell you how many times people have told me that some of my trials and tribulation have inspired them in other ways, whether it's, you know, a procedure, a medical procedure, or even just something of an anxiety inducing scenario. So hearing that is really, really like unbelievable. It really puts it into perspective how my performance and my art can inspire other people, pushes me to keep going. And so I think that kind of is turned up to 11 a little bit, the positivity and, you know, always, you know, trying to, dust yourself off and get up to fight back another day and don't let them take advantage of you next time.
Gotcha. Speed round. Sami Zayn.
Underdog.
Yeah. Absolutely. He's doing some really good work right now.
And he's another one that like his character, and I think it has to do with the current leadership in WWE, but like a lot of characters are pretty three-dimensional now and ever evolving, and you know, there's longevity. I don't like this guy, and even though this guy and I are both good guys, we still don't like each other because of the history. That's incredible. Exactly. And Sammy's character has always been very dynamic, and I don't think a lot of people really realize that. And you know, I think, you know, that we're very lucky to be able to watch him perform. And because he could just be an underdog, right? He could just, you know, dust himself off. But like the fact that his character has changed time and time again, and it feels organic. It's never felt forced. Never.
Right.
Like that's what I want to be as a performer.
Right. You know, you were mentioning the new regime in WWE, man. They are, you know, and the irony is not lost on me that the two main guys from DX, Hunter and Shawn, are running the company now.
Crazy, right?
It is wonderful, and
crazy.
I mean, and they are doing amazing work steering that ship.
It would be cool either way. Like The Rock is on the board of administration, but like the fact that Triple H and Shawn Michaels are, you know, authority figures, but the fact that like they originally came together because they were anti-authority and now they're the suits is so ironic.
The irony is awesome.
Love it.
So tell us about your favorite match that you have been a part of, if you can narrow it down.
That's hard, because I'm actually my own worst critic, and no matter what, it's like, I didn't like this. I could have did this better. It would have been better to do this, which I think really shows how passionate an artist can be, and not be complacent. Because you can always learn from anything. But if I had to pick, I would say probably my first match back after my skull fracture, just because of all the, like, literally, like, in addition to all the hard work that I put into that process and physical therapy and stuff like that, it was poetic because it was literally, my first in-ring appearance was a month and 1 day to the day it happened in the same building it happened at. And then we promoted the match for a month later. So it was kind of like a small taste of it. And it's like, I'm so close to the finish line. That was really, really cool. And the work that I put into that creatively, the stuff that I changed going into it. I also, when I was in the hospital, I made a joke. I was like, well, you know, like, I shaved my face for that show when I got hurt. And I was like, should I grow an injury beard? Like, I don't have to shave anytime soon. I'm not going to be on camera. And someone was like, can you even grow a beard? And I was like, all right, challenge accepted. So I grew a beard until my first match back. I was like, the longer my beard is, like you're going to see how long this, process was. The process ended up being a little bit longer than I anticipated. And I actually hated having a beard, but like, I think that also helped tell the story for how long it's been. Even if you don't know, like if you forget how long it's been, the visual of like how long my beard was like, wow, this is a long time coming. And then there's like other things where like getting to work with friends, getting to work with a friend in Florida, that type of thing. Another thing that I've challenged myself with professionally is always finding a silver lining. Because I am my own worst critic. There's times where I may drive to a show that's 8 hours away and I just barely break even. And somebody would be like, why are you doing this? It doesn't make sense. Like that's a dumb investment. But as long as I can find a silver lining to any match, it's always worth it. Like, for example, when I fractured my skull, first of all, it really bothers me that like so many people are like, oh, that for a hot dog and a handshake. Like, why is there this negative idea about the indies? Like, why? Like, I get it. Some people are like, oh, you should have probably got paid a lot of money for that. But like, if I saw that, I'd be like, holy cow, you're telling me this guy isn't getting paid as much money as, John Cena, and he's doing this for my entertainment? I want to watch this guy. What won't he do? Mm-hmm. I don't, like, I can't say that, like I occasionally push that, but I'm just, like I'm one guy, yelling upstream. But even like with that, like I don't regret it. Like, yeah, it's affected me to this day with hearing loss. I have a little bit of nerve damage in my face, balance issues. But I made a lot of friends that reached out to me, just random strangers that saw that video. And I wouldn't trade that for the world. If I undid it, I wouldn't have these incredible people in my life. And, so there's that, I can go to a show, a match. Did I see a friend? Did I wrestle a friend? Did I learn something? Did I have a good match? Did I make a new fan? There's so many possible silver linings to every opportunity that it's not about the money. I don't measure success in my artwork and my performance by money. And I've been dropping this line often. When I challenge myself to stop thinking as pro wrestling as a competition, in addition to that, I also challenge myself to kind of view it as less a career opportunity and more of a hobby, because it's easier to justify any sort of negative aspect. For example, I may order a pair of gear and it costs me $300. It's like, oh, that's kind of hard to do because I'm going to have to, make this much money back by this, whatever. But people have expensive hobbies, and there's no, if somebody dresses up, like I have a friend who's really into LARPing, where they do like medieval, like brawling and stuff like that. There's no chance of them making a profit off of that, but they put money into that. I know people that are into cosplay that dress up like characters with no real ambitions of making money, and they spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on these hobbies. That it makes everything easier to be like, look, this isn't about the money. This is about what I love and what it means to me, because there was a year plus where I didn't have wrestling. And I know how much that actually affected my mental health, as well as the COVID-19 lockdown. This is my escape. This is my outlet. So when I don't have that, and when I'm not performing, it really affects me. So it's nice to kind of have these outlets where recently, this recent challenge of being more conscious of my social media presence and being in the public persona and putting content out there, that's scratching that itch for this current, cochlear implant recovery time. So it's really hard to pick one particular match when you're so thankful for every opportunity you have. Long answer to a short question.
And, like you were saying also, anytime you invest in yourself and your passions, that is always money well spent.
Of course.
So if you could only be one, would you rather be great in the ring or great on the mic?
That's a tremendous question. That is a phenomenal question, because if you're smart with your persona, you can make a lot of money without abusing your body if you can connect with the audience. And that is the, responsible thing. When Mick Foley said, he started really connecting with the crowd, not getting thrown off the cell, but when he started pulling a sock out of his tights, and he wished he would have did that a lot sooner. So I recognize that. But honestly, I like performing. I'd much rather be better in the ring. I've always been, drawn to perform to sports, extreme sports, whether it's skating, skateboarding, BMX, motocross. That adrenaline rush, that adrenaline junkie, I really gravitate to that. And like I said, there was a time where I couldn't get physical in the ring, and that was kind of a bummer. Because of the rush of the crowd and just being able to do what I do is just so unlike anything. And I actually have a little bit of anxiety speaking publicly, which is a recent thing, which isn't something that it's like, I want to run away from this, right? But it actually, I don't know if I've actually disclosed this publicly, so I'll give you a possible hot take here, exclusive. I've been dealing with some effects, some vocabulary issues. I noticed it maybe about a couple months after my injury, where I realized it was really hard to read words that I wasn't completely familiar with, like I couldn't pronounce it. And I was like, well, I've been out of school for so long, maybe, it's a, you lose it type thing. But then I started running into what I call verbal roadblocks, where I can think of a word. I know what I want to say. I just can't do it. I can't call it. It's on the tip of my tongue. And I was like, that's a new thing. And I started being really conscious of it. And this is really strange. And so I started developing anxiety over that, speaking to somebody, hey, am I going to have these verbal roadblocks? It's kind of embarrassing. But I finally saw a neurologist last year, and they confirmed that the part of my brain that I did injure is indeed responsible for vocabulary capability. So they 100% think it is related. That being said, they weren't concerned about it. Granted, I didn't really have a good example of how frequently, like all the testing and stuff I did, passed with flying colors, like almost like a dementia test. No issues whatsoever. But in that particular moment, I didn't run into any of those word blocks. So I'm like, you got to take my word for this, doc. So I could do vocal vocabulary therapy, but they weren't sure if that was really necessary, because they didn't have any, real, look at the paper, like look how frequently this is. So that is an option that I could, look into. I do have a follow-up next month. And since then, I've been keeping a list of whenever I run into these word blocks, and whenever I get that word, I write it down, just so I can be like, all right, doc, here's the frequency of this. So in a way, I kind of have developed a little bit of anxiety about, speaking to people, especially people that I don't know. It is really weird, because like when I'm performing, when I'm Shawn Phoenix, that anxiety goes away. It's still there. It's underlying, like, oh, I hope I don't run into this. But like, I noticed like talking to somebody on the phone, like almost like slurring my words, like just I trip over my own feet anticipating a trip, essentially. So the idea of being a better speaker is very, enthralling to me. I'd much rather be a better speaker, just in day-to-day life. But as far as performing, I'd much rather be better in the ring. Long answer to another short question. I do apologize.
Not a problem. Not a problem. My wife's over on the YouTube the YouTube chat, and she just saying hello. So I just put her up on the screen. That's Julia. We've been married 26 years.
Wow. So, what's the secret?
Yeah.
You know what? Don't tell me because it won't be a secret anymore. Tell me about it privately.
You know, just a lot of well, in her case, she's been very patient with me. I mean,
Yeah.
and you know, you just you know, you put up with the good, you put up with the bad, and you know,
For better or worse, right?
walking away from it's not an option. So
Right.
you know, anyway.
Sorry to put you on the spot like that.
Oh no. Speed round.
Okay.
Eric Young.
Ooh, don't fire Eric. I don't know if that counts as an answer. I obviously started watching NWA TNA when it was on TV because I wanted to absorb any wrestling I could, and then with Team Canada and everything like that. But when I met him when he came to the local company, I think he was on that. He was doing that persona, so I have a little bit of connectivity to that. With Eric, it always seems like he was the bridemaid and never the bride. But it wasn't even when they did strap a rocket to him, it kind of felt like, is this a charity thing? You know, he definitely deserves all the all the praise in the world. He's an incredible performer, but you know, it's just something there that isn't really grabbing a lot of people, which is unfortunate because he's a hell of a performer. You know, and I think they strapped a rocket to him when he was doing a more serious character, where the Don't Fire Eric, the Goofy, the Shark Boy team, the Curry Man seems to be what he was more comfortable with. And I admire him for, you know, taking on a challenge. It's important to challenge yourself and grow as a performer. But as far as connecting with the audience, I think that vote may have been missed. But I'm not an expert. I'm sure there's 1,000 people smarter than me that may say, you're an idiot, Shawn, and here's why. But that, on the top of my head, you know, like, he's incredible, but I look at it this way. I've never heard anybody say Eric Young is their favorite wrestler. And that's weird because he has all the tools to be, but he's just, I don't know what it is.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, you know, I think the guy is phenomenally talented, but he's never gotten that one break that would really propel him into the. But you know, he's had a great career. So,
yeah, absolutely. You know. Admittedly, I wasn't watching when he was doing the sanity thing, so this is not including that. That is, I don't know.
Right.
I know he got like a rocket strapped to him on that, but that is, I don't know anything about that. So I could be completely wrong, and people would be like, Shawn, you're an idiot because the sanity thing. And I can acknowledge that. That might be the case, but as far as my knowledge.
Gotcha. So do you have an all-time favorite match as a fan? A match that you can have watched it 1,000,000 times and it just never gets old, and there's always some new little nugget you can pull from it.
I have two favorite matches that are so obscure that people think I'm joking with them when I say it, but like, it's one of those matches. They're both matches where it's like, watch this. You don't like wrestling, watch this, and you will never guess what they are. But it's not necessarily, there's things that I learn from it that's like, oh, that was really good. Like, for example, AJ Styles is one of my favorite wrestlers to watch because there's always so many little things that I notice. I'm like, oh, that was so good. And like, my buddy would be like, what are you talking about? And like, they don't see what I saw. Those matches being Jerry Lawler versus Andy Kaufman. Unbelievable whole performance. Like I was showing somebody recently and I was like, oh no, they cut this down. The video I saw was 15 minutes long. This is short. And because like, you know, like that is all foreign to me, how they had the crowd in the palm of their hands without touching one another. That's mind blowing. I would kill to have that connection. And in addition to that, Coco Ware and the Masked Patriot from, I want to say Mid-South, I might be incorrect, where I don't know what happened, But Coco was not playing around, and he beat the snot out of the Mass Patriot. Maybe it was a Dark Patriot. He beat the ever-loving hell out of him, like he owed him money. I don't know what happened. I heard Mr. Cornette speculate that maybe a derogatory term was said towards Coco. That would make sense why he was so visibly upset. But I randomly sent it to my buddy Lee Moriarty just because we both love it. And Coco gives Patriot, like, he knocks him out with a clothesline. Like, he's out on his feet the first thing Coco does. And then he gives him a brain buster. Like, Patriot's as dead as can be. Like a solid bag of potatoes, complete dead weight. Coco lifts him up, gives him a brain buster, and then he pins him by like kneeling on him, and mid-pin, Coco just smacks the hell out of Patriot. Like, it is such a loud crack. It is so unbelievably uncomfortable, and it is so entertaining. It's like one of those, this isn't real, but that was real, and that was unbelievable what I just saw. And to this day, I don't know.
It's not real, but it just got real.
Yeah, right. Like, this was not how this was supposed to go. And I love that for a pure entertainment standpoint. Just like, there's so many questions I have about it where it's like, I almost don't want to know the answers because it can't live up to what I think is going on and like the repercussions afterwards. But I love those two matches for two different reasons. Clearly, as far like where I mentioned earlier, Stone Cold and Kurt Angle at SummerSlam 2001. Not even nostalgia talking. I watched that again recently, and I was like, this is as good as I thought it was. And on Reddit, somebody was posting old Observer articles about like the Attitude Era and the Invasion Era. And I remember reading, like, they started to get into that point, and I was like, this is exciting because when I was a kid, I didn't know anything about backstage gossip or anything like that. So like reading it in hindsight and like what was the feel of the internet at the time, and hearing like reading about like Meltzer talk about like how good that match was, it was like really validating. It's like, okay, like it wasn't just me. So like I love that match. But yeah.
So, and this can be present day or past, who would be a dream opponent? Who would Shawn Phoenix love to work?
I can give you two answers to that.
Okay.
Because there's two sides of me that has two different, there's the fan of me, and then there's the businessman of me. The fan of me, Paul London, any day. Well, maybe I should say like Paul London as far as like a realistic goal. He was my, I loved Ring of Honor as a kid. And when he went to WWE, he was my favorite wrestler. And I went to No Way Out 2005. It was a birthday present. My birthday was like 2 days later. And I had a sign like Paul London's #1 fan. And I ended up getting sick and spent like the entirety. I must have been food poisoned. I don't know. I spent like the entire time like in the bathroom, throwing up and going to the bathroom, and I completely missed his match. And that was the one thing I wanted to see. But fast forward to that, after that, we ended up becoming pretty good friends just by happenstance. And like I can text that guy whenever I want and ask for advice and just shoot the shit. It's really weird to receive a happy birthday text message from somebody that I really looked up to, and the fact that he's still working and we've never even been in the ring together since me going pro is like, it's an itch that I need to scratch. And then the businessman of me, I'd say whoever can make me the most money, whether it's The Rock, John Cena, like completely unrealistic, but there's that aspect of me. He understands I should always want to work with the best in that category, even like just for the exposure. And obviously, if they're such high caliber, then I'll learn a ton from them. Then you get guys like, Shawn Michaels, Hayabusa, unfortunately, who's no longer with us. Raven's a huge inspiration. CM Punk. Essentially anybody that has ever resonated with me and inspired me in some way, I would love to tangle with them. I was supposed to be in a tag team with Gangrel, so I'm pretty disappointed that didn't happen, specifically because I breathe fire and he spits blood.
Yeah.
So like that's a bucket list for me. There's also a bucket list of breathing fire with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, and if which I also have his blessing to breathe fire, which is super cool. Even if he doesn't want to breathe fire with me, just having him literally pass the torch to me would be the coolest thing in the world. And I'd make that my 8x10 on every merch table I have. So there's a lot of things that on my bucket list that I hope that I can scratch out someday.
Awesome. Speed round. And this one is actually Pittsburgh oriented. Britt Baker.
I'm super happy for her. I don't know her that well. Because when she was in the one company, I was in the other. We never really crossed paths. And my one tag team partner didn't like her. And I heard stories about how she can be pretty mean to people. I've never experienced that. I'm not going to say, I'm judging her from that. That kind of puts my guard up a little bit. So I'm super happy for her. She deserves all the success in the world. However, okay, actually, let me reel this back. She's not from Pittsburgh. She's from Punxsutawney, and that is no more than like 2.5 hours away. And as somebody that lives in Pittsburgh, one of the only wrestlers that live in Pittsburgh, that irks me so much. Because that's like saying, you live in, it's a whole different town. The whole climate is different. It's so, that's obviously where Punxsutawney Phil is from, the legend. It is such a nothing town that literally its claim to fame is Punxsutawney Phil, with good reason. Phil is the only correct. He's the only correct weatherman that he's actually been correct 100% of the time on his predictions. Anytime the predictions don't match what he said, it's not Phil's fault. It's the member of the inner circle who misunderstood what Phil said. Not a lot of people know that. Phil has never been wrong. But it is so drastically different that it's like, she's not actually from Pittsburgh. But that's just me, gatekeeping, because I do live from Pittsburgh. But props to her for the Britsburg thing. That's genius. Absolutely genius.
Yeah. Absolutely. But yeah, that there's been a lot of backstage rumblings out of AEW that she's kind of difficult. And I'm a long-term Adam Cole fan, and apparently she did Adam kind of dirty.
So I was going to say, I've actually had more interactions with Adam, and I would walk to the end of the earth. He doesn't. I'm sure he can't pick me out of a lineup, but running into him at WrestleCon, meeting him there, just telling him, nice to meet you. And then doing a seminar of his and saying, I'm a friend of such and such. We met at WrestleCon, getting me a hug just because of that. And, friend of this person's a friend of mine. Just a total sweetheart. So I have more interactions with him.
He seems like a good human being.
Right. And that's how I try to carry myself. Just like, I don't it's not fair to judge somebody on stories through other people, because I don't know if that person, has it out for that person, or that other person was having a bad day. But, I've heard enough that it's like, we're probably not, going to get along too well. So, we just kind of I will say, whenever I fractured my skull in 2018, I was in the hospital. And all the nurses were mind blown. Like, how did you break your skull? And they were even more mind blown that I had the video of it, because they're not used to that. One of the nurses told me that she knew Britt. And then I was trying to find my x-ray because I wanted to put it on my t-shirt. And I got a hold of, it's probably the only time Britt and I have ever interacted. I got a hold of Britt to ask, hey, this nurse said she dated your brother or whoever. Do you know who that might be and how I can get in contact with her? And she's like, oh yeah, I love her, you know, whatever. That's really the only interaction that I've ever really had with Britt personally. So she was super nice to me. So take that for what it's worth.
Right. So, let me see here. So, what is your favorite move to do? You know, what is something you just really enjoy doing? And on the flip side of that, is there a move that you won't do, or at least you would rather not do? And that can be giving or receiving.
Fantastic question. I don't really know if I have a favorite move I like to do, but there are moves that I have been doing since I was wrestling on a trampoline when I was 13. So being able to do that professionally, which is kind of like why I wanted the backyard. I wanted to become familiar with, you know, my capabilities and become, you know, like more in tune with my body, become comfortable with it. So there's things that I've literally grown up doing that I, you know, the enziguri, the standing somersault, standing moonsault, which stems from paying homage to Hayabusa. The 450, on the other hand, I haven't done it since that accident. And that was my finishing move. That being said, pulling the curtain back a little bit, there's something there to add to the story where anytime I climbed to the top rope to do the 450, I'd climb back down and I couldn't do it because I thought that I would be doing myself and the fan a disservice to not tell that story of, is Shawn Phoenix ever going to do this? And it wasn't until 2022 where I actually finally jumped off the top rope and I hit a swanton, and I won a title with that move. So it's kind of like, okay, I don't need to do that 450 right now. I'm going to keep doing the swanton until it's not going to work out for me. And who knows when I'm going to break out that 450 again, you know, because that's something I've been doing since I was 13. Will I ever do it again? I genuinely don't know. Can I physically do it? I genuinely don't know. So as far as that aspect, I would say, you know, I'm not, you know, there's that, you know, that's kind of like an S tier move that like, we know he can do this. As far as moves taking, I don't know if anybody else in the business can relate to this, but any move being done to me that involves twisting before the bump always messes me up, whether it's a belly to belly, whether it's something from the top rope. Like I took a choke slam from the top rope and like rotated. I think my body is so used to being slammed and the impact of the joints moving forward and backwards. It's kind of gotten used to that where you have the momentum of turning and then doing it. It always throws whether it's my back, my neck, you know, my shoulders out of alignment, and I'm super stiff the next day. I hate taking those moves, and genuinely that chokeslam that I took off the top rope, that was in April. I'm still in incredible pain day to day since that, and that's not trying to be to sell a story or anything like that. That's the honest to God's truth. I injured I threw my hip out of alignment and then my psoas muscle on my left side, and then I fractured my right ankle. So then I had to put all my weight on that injured psoas muscle, which made it unbelievably painful. And then I learned the psoas muscle is the only muscle that goes from the back, the upper body, to the bottom, to the legs. And it is one of the hardest muscles to work out. And I haven't found any relief in any, you know, stretching yoga. I've actually finally just scheduled a back specialist that I'll be seeing on Wednesday, because I literally, my range in motion of my leg, it's not that I have sciatica, but like I can raise my right leg almost like at a, you know, for my left leg, I can barely get it off the ground. Like I just physically can't move it, and it hurts to walk, hurts to sit. So anything that like that really like woke something up in me. You're like, I'm not taking these rotating moves anymore because this is unbearable.
Gotcha. So, you know, you're comparatively still a pretty young guy. But
I appreciate that.
but knowing everything that you know at this point in your life, if you could give any advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Phenomenal question. Phenomenal question. Anytime I do a seminar, whenever we would be encouraged to ask questions, I would always ask, what's one thing you wish you learned early in your career that you know now? Most of the time I address it more to myself. What's something that you wish you learned 5 years in, that I can reflect with? So to have that asked of me is really, really weird to be on that side of that question. If I could tell myself something back then, it's really hard to answer because I don't have any regrets, Naturally, right. I'd say don't do that 450 off that top rope, but I already explained all the positive I would have missed out on. Maybe I would have said something along the lines of, they're called high risk for a reason. And for so long in my life, I would take a risk that has never gone sour. And because of that, I didn't put any mental energy into any of the possible outcomes that were negative, that it was even something as simple as like my mom saying like, don't go out tonight, it's snowing, it's going to be a bad snowstorm, it's dangerous. I would say something like, I'll be fine. And I was, because I felt like the moment I started paying attention to that negativity, I would manifest it. And obviously, I felt, for lack of a better term, invincible and unbreakable. And that's why I wanted to put the video out there too, was because I wanted to teach people, yeah, they are called high risk for a reason. And the possibility of this not going the way you think it is a valid one, even if you feel unbreakable. So maybe something along the lines like that, but I wouldn't necessarily, say don't do this, because I wouldn't be who I am today had I not gone through any of my struggles. And even just in real life, I don't have any regrets. So there's that. There's some other things that it's like, don't say this to this person, that type of thing. Right. You upset this person. Definitely that. Probably more so that than like, hey, don't be an idiot,
Yeah. Yeah. And, hey, don't be an idiot is something we could all advise ourselves,
Yeah. But like I said, we need to learn from our mistakes, So it's like,
for sure.
If somebody makes no mistakes, how smart can they be? Right. Because it takes an intelligent person to learn from their mistakes and to build and grow on that. But that's me on the soapbox.
Absolutely. So, something that we've done in all of these that's just been kind of fun is we've let the current guest pose a question for the next guest. And so a previous guest, an Atlanta-based wrestler down here named Dante Darko.
No, Dante!
You know,
I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding.
Wow. So Dante posed this question, and that is, in terms of the wrestling business, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
First of all, I love this idea of having somebody ask blindly. That's amazing. To answer that question, my friends actually did a little documentary sit-down interview about my skull fracture and my road to recovery. That is a cheap plug on my YouTube, on my Twitter, on my Facebook, wherever. Covalent did an amazing job with high-def cameras. It was incredible. And that was kind of one of the questions that I think we ended it on, was what's next? What do you see yourself doing? And so it's kind of familiar. So I don't want you to think that I'm, repeating old lines for the sake of being lazy, but it's something that I genuinely feel. If you would have asked me when I was 14 where I saw myself and what my goals would be, I would have said in WWE. But now, in hindsight, I understand I'm 5'5". I'm $150. I have a laundry list of injuries. I get it. I can't do anything that somebody can't do. There's nothing I can do that somebody can't do in Mexico. I totally get it. The talent pool is wide. And it honestly took a lot of reflection to come to terms with that. But I would say it's not even necessarily where do I see myself, but like what are my goals? Because it's a very obtainable. And I say, as long as I'm staying safe, having fun, traveling around, making friends, making money, that's my goal. Because any of that is obtainable if I allow it to be. But in addition to that, it doesn't stovepipe me into one particular goal. For example, all of that could be obtainable if I signed to WWE. All of that could be obtainable if I go to Japan. It doesn't limit my possibilities. And it's a genuine thing. Like I alluded to earlier, all the silver linings that I can get from wrestling that makes all this worth it. That, if those things aren't being met time and time again, then that doesn't seem worth it to me. So as long as I'm meeting those goals, that's where I hope to be in 5 years. So I would like to think it's possible.
Gotcha. So, since this is part of a series, do you have a question that you would like to pose to the next guest? And I'll go ahead and tell you who the next couple of guests are. The question does not have to be particular to them.
Okay.
But coming up on Wednesday, actually at 6 p.m. Eastern time, I've got episode 80 with a wrestler by the ring name the Flowing Samoan Anthony Toatele.
Oh wow!
And then on Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, I've got episode 81 with a wrestler from out of South Florida who is currently being featured on All Caribbean Wrestling, the Shogun Bruce Cross.
Okay.
But like I said, the question doesn't have to be particular to them, but do you have a question you would like to pose?
Yeah, I guess this isn't really directed to any one person.
Right.
And I guess I should preface this by, when you ask this, please let it be known that I'm not asking this question aggressively, judgmentally, or anything like that, but more of inspiring in a self-reflecting way. Mm-hmm. The question that I would ask is kind of a two-parter. Are you making your goal in pro wrestling? If not, what do you think is holding you back? And in addition to that, why aren't you overcoming that?
Wow. That is a great question. I mean,
so please let them know that I'm not like judging them. No, it's like one of those things that, like, sometimes you need to be like, this is what's holding me back. And once you identify what's holding you back, then you can make the process of overcoming that. And
exactly,
some people have pretty legitimate reasons. And even if they have a pretty legitimate reason, something along the lines of family life, like, that's totally fine. Everybody has a valid reason. But if they look into themselves and say, this is what's holding me back, and I can overcome this, then they've got nothing stopping them but themselves.
Gotcha. Absolutely. So we're pretty much toward the end of things now. So do you have any? Well, I remember from your video, which I mentioned earlier, that is just excellent, and everybody should go to your YouTube and check that video out. You mentioned that you've got a match coming up in March.
Correct.
So besides that, do you have any other upcoming shows or anything at all you'd like to give some hype to?
I'm sure that I do. I'm just a million miles an hour and have to refer to my calendar. And off the top of my head, I don't really know all the dates. But come like, I want to say it was like December. I was like, all right, cool. We need to start mapping out the year. And I've like booked myself some dates all the way in like September and stuff like that. So I try to stay as busy as possible. But yeah, the first one back is March 22nd, I think, with RCW Revolution Championship Wrestling, which is kind of my home. We actually took a small break because we lost our venue. This will be the first one back. I'm in a triple threat match. So I'm pretty excited about that. And initially, like I was open to coming back in February. Like I took January off preemptively because of the surgery. And then I, just happened to like, I didn't really find anything for February right away. And then I'm getting new gear made as well as a headpiece made, which I said in my thing, to just protect my implant. And my gear maker was like, well, when do you need this by? And I was like, well, I suppose as of right now, my first booking isn't until March. He's like, all right, I can get it done by then. So I was like, all right, well, I can't change it up on him now. Be like, hey man, I actually need this now. So it's like, all right, cool. I guess I'll take February off too, which, I was saying my back is so messed up right now that I'm kind of enjoying not being in the car for 8 hours.
No doubt.
But yeah, I want to plug that RCW Revolution Championship Wrestling. I believe they put all their videos up on YouTube, which is super chill. I'd love when companies do that. If you would allow me to plug my social media, I'm always open to chatting with anybody. My handle is X Shawn X Phoenix. That's X before Shawn, SHAWN, X before Phoenix. That's Instagram, that's Facebook, that's Twitter, that's whatever. That's if a new social media pops up, I squat on that username. And even if I don't intend on using it, you can find me in some capacity on there. My pro wrestling tee store, my Brainbuster tee store. My Brainbuster tee store is brainbustertees.com/Shawn-Phoenix. I didn't come up with that URL. That's the only one that is not X Shawn X Phoenix. But yeah, like I love, I'm always open to chat with anybody. So anybody hit me up. During I have the time, I definitely don't ignore people. So feel free to hit me up. I appreciate anybody taking the time out of their day to look into me.
Absolutely. And it really is funny with social media, how connected all of this stuff is. Like, I mean, I literally, stumbled upon you by seeing a video of another, what appeared to be a serious mishap.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that.
You ended up saying, yeah.
We need to do another one of these to talk about that one. We'll do a Shawn Phoenix greatest hits and misses recurring video.
We should do that. Actually,
I'm down.
Yeah. But anyway,
they're down. I hope they're like, I don't want to hear this guy again. But if they're open to it.
No. But yeah, like I said, I'll be back on Wednesday at 6 with Anthony Toatele. And if you like what we've got going here, definitely do the old like, comment, share, and subscribe. Spread the word. This thing is really taking on a life of its own. And, I'm having an absolute blast doing these. And, I want to thank you for your time, Shawn. This has been awesome. And, everybody be good to each other, love each